Hey, this is Jen, and this video is for Claude of Simply Maya, who was asking what are the best settings for a Maya grid. Um, and to that, my answer is it depends. It depends on what you're comfortable with, and it depends on what you need from your grid. But in general, personally, I like to have certain settings going all the time. So I'm just going to come in here to the grid options and just talk about that a little bit. Something that I always have on are the grid numbers. I want to see numbers. Give me numbers. So my perspective grid, I usually have the numbers show on the actual grid instead of just around the edges of it. So I'll turn on axes and just hit apply. And while I do appreciate the muted colors that Maya uses for its grid by default, which are these dark gray colors here, or well, the dark gray color since they're all using the same color, it doesn't really help for the video, and it doesn't really help in a practical manner where there's no contrast and I can't see the different lines that make up the grid. So usually I come in here and I change that, and I will turn the axes to black and change the grid lines to something a little lighter so we have some contrast. We can see what is what, and I'm going to talk about them. So while I usually have the numbers showing and some contrast in the colors for the different lines in the grid, something that varies based on what scene you're working on and what you need from the grid in terms of precision. Something that changes somewhat often are the grid line settings and the subdivision, and of course the length and width. So the length and width just determines where the grid will end. So it'll start counting from 0 and extend out to this value and then stop. That's as far as the grid will go. And by default, for some reason, it's 12 units. So let's just say you bump it up to 50. You just get an extended grid. It just goes for further into 3D space. That's pretty much length and width. And sometimes this might be necessary to increase. A lot of times it might be, not even just sometimes, like a lot of times it might be necessary. Especially if your scene is really spread around, you might need to get a larger grid. And then you have these other two settings here. So grid lines every 5 units will give us these light gray lines every 5 units. That's pretty straightforward. The thing is that you might have a scene where maybe you need to have the numbers appear more frequently than say 5 units. Let's say you need them every single unit. You need to know where you are, and you could just enter 1. So that's all well and good. That looks good. Sure. It's a little more dense. The mesh suddenly got a little busy. I keep saying mesh because it looks like a backdoor screen for your porch, but our grid is now pretty dense, which kind of not that great when you zoom out and you're trying to work with things. For example, let's just create something here and just kind of tuck it behind the grid, and as you can see, it really gets in the way, but it's handy if you need to just get up close and have like really tiny incremental places where you can snap stuff to and move stuff around, and you can actually get more precision and more divisions and more increments if you bump up the subdivision. So just what's going to happen is that the area between the grid lines, these pale lines here, will be subdivided even further. So if you were to bump this up to 10, we'll have twice the number of subdivisions, and you will have twice the accuracy or precision, twice the precision of movement and placement. So if you need it, sure, you can get a little crazy with it if you need that kind of precision. For me, these are not general settings. For me, grid lines every 5 units, that's fine, and 5 or even 10 subdivisions, those are pretty good for me for the most part, since usually stuff I'm working with, they're not that tiny. So yeah, these are usually decent settings for me in the general sense, even if my colors are a little bit different. So I just switch these real quick just to provide a quick contrast for the different lines that make up the grid. But yeah, there are no best settings in general. It really depends on the scene, and if you usually work with similar kind of scenes, then maybe you can develop find settings that are good for you, but I can't really recommend precise numbers that will work for you. It really depends. But as long as you know exactly the relationship between these guys, you should be fine. So these particular attributes, that's really up to you. Well, it's up to you to an extent. It's really up to what the scene needs, those attributes. That's what they depend on. What's more up to you are the colors and these options here, like if you want numbers to show, if you want to hide the axes. I don't know why you would, but the options are there. Or if you want the, let's put that back, or if you want the axes to not be as thick and kind of get lost in the grid and having to depend on the actual numbers to find your center here. For whatever reason, if you want to do that, that's fine. If you don't want grid lines and you just want the subdivision lines, you can do that. Or if you don't want the subdivision lines and you just want the grid lines, you can do that. So basically it's up to you. It's up to what you're comfortable with, or it depends on what you're comfortable with, and it depends also on what the scene needs. And that's it. Yeah, there is no magical preset for that will just work for everyone. It just depends on what kind of scenes you're working with. And that's it. Bye.